Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. He is a contributor to Cold Omaha, along with 1500 ESPN, along with several other blogs and random places that you'll find his scribblings on the internet. He is Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I am fantastic. We had a great Monday night game. Not something we've been able to say in the last 7 years? 8 years? It's been a while. But it was a great game to watch. It was, it had a little bit of intrigue. They changed it up a little bit against our defense, and we still dominated. So, it was a great game, and we're going to get all to that. But first, before we get too deep into the show, we are ad-free, so if you guys listen to the show and you like what you hear, feel free to donate to the show. You can do so either one of two different ways. You can do so at paypal.me/Norse Code. You can also go to patreon.com/Norse Code to donate to the show. So, if you'd like to do that, you're more than welcome to. If you hear value, go ahead and do that. We like to keep this nice and ad-free, and we do have a donation to bring up for this week's show. Daniel White sent us Tree Fitty times 10. We're keeping the Loch Ness Monster at bay times 10. Keep up the great work. Going to my first Vikings home game on Sunday against the Texans. Any suggestions on where to go for a good pre-game experience, like adult beverages and fan experience? Well, what do you think? Arif? See, my thought is always to end up at Matt's Bar, but Matt's Bar opens way too late to be able to go down to make it to the game.
Yeah, I'm thinking actually the last place that I went to pregame before heading to the stadium was the Poorhouse, which actually it does the whole Sunday really, really well. Because I've got all kinds of screens, and you can watch any game that you want without any obstructed view, because they've got basically 2 levels, and the screens are in between the 2 levels. And they've got great food. It gets really packed though, so I would get in there kind of early to get a seat. But I've enjoyed that. I enjoy that a lot. Evidently, the new tailgating lots are a treat, and depending on who's running them, you can pay to get into the tailgating lots and eat whatever, hang out with some Vikings fans. So those are probably the 2 experiences I would recommend. I haven't done the tailgating lots, but a lot of people seem to love them. I know Eric Thompson of the Daily Norseman has been to the tailgating lots. He seemed to enjoy it a lot. So yeah. And
he lived to tell the tale, so that's positive. You're probably not going to die in our tailgating lots, unlike some stadiums.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm not going to say
we're not going to guarantee
0 chance of it, but definitely a better chance of not getting stabbed than, say, out west.
It's or Buffalo, where somebody's going through a table, or the San Francisco Stadium, where they're averaging 1 death a week. So still. That number might be inflated slightly, but it feels like every time you hear about a death at a football stadium, it happens out in Santa Clara. So I'm not saying that it's guaranteed, but gross. Anyway, thanks so much for the donation. We really do appreciate it. Tree Fitty helps us keep the lights on, helps us with space online, helps us get new equipment for later this year. So keep giving. We really do appreciate it, and yeah, we're giving out two shows a week right now. So we hope you guys enjoy it. Keep our numbers up and share the show with somebody. Put it on Facebook. Put it on Twitter. Just help us out. Just get as much exposure to Norse Code as we can. Arif needs to be exposed.
Yeah.
I like your reluctance on that. That works for me. So, I don't think we have any other pressing Vikings news to get to, other than that was one hell of a game that we pulled off on Monday.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic, and this is the first time I've been really confident in all 3 phases of the game: special teams, offense, defense. I thought that for the most part, and there were hiccups for all 3 of those units for sure. But this is the first time I was really sort of happy to see what I saw from the offense over the course of the game. because I've been really worried about what the offense can put together from a sustainability perspective in terms of their ability to create first downs. Which is one of the first things Mike Zimmer said in the post game to the locker room. He's like, "Get 22 first downs, fantastic job." So I was really happy about that. I was happy about just generally the continued success of the offense and avoiding turnovers. Obviously, the defense played lights out again. It's proving probably to be the best defense in the league right now, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but we expected at some point that in the Zimmer era that the Vikings would hit that height, and it seems like they've hit that height. And then I thought the return game and the punting game was fantastic. So a lot of things to be really happy with in this game.
There wasn't a single phase of the game that seemed off. Like, everything seemed to be running fairly smoothly. Even the offense, which hadn't scored in the first quarter all year, all of a sudden had something. Like, it was just odd to see things just going really well for us all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think that it makes sense. A lot of people were not worried about the offense because Sam Bradford had been playing well, and that's true. But I think that if your quarterback is playing well, but at the end of the day you're not creating first downs and getting keeping the defense off the field, getting into scoring position to make some scores and stuff like that, it really doesn't matter how well any individual player is playing, even one as important as the quarterback, because you're not getting your offense to score points and put yourself in a position to win. If you hold your opponent to 17 points and you score 10, that's not great. But in this case, the offense was pumping on all cylinders. I mean, we saw excellent performances from receivers. Obviously, Cordero Patterson was a topic of discussion. Diggs played well, just not up to sort of the recent standard that he'd put himself for. Adam Thielen did fine, except for that drop. And Charles Johnson, of course, exploded, 2 receptions, 70 yards. Kind of weird. Was nice to see. Kyle Rudolph played really well. The offensive line, for the most part, did a very, very good job in creating running lanes and in providing pass protection. Sam Bradford, of course, he played well after the first quarter was over. Jerick McKinnon played pretty well before the fourth quarter started. Just fantastic performances all around from the offense.
Well, let's delve into it then. First things first, let's talk about the running game. There were a lot of questions about the running game going into this game, and Jerick McKinnon and crew were able to go over 100 yards this game. What was the big difference between this game and the Carolina game?
Well, there's a couple of big differences. The first is I think that the Giants' defensive front, which includes Jonathan Hankins and Damon Harrison, very, very talented, is probably just not as good at stopping the run as Kawan Short and Star Lotulelei. Like, that's part of it, and that should be taken into account. But I think that the difference is very small. Damon Harrison is incredibly good at stopping the run. I think that the bigger thing is that Jerick McKinnon is, right now, he's a better running back than Adrian Peterson. And I don't think it sounds hot takey to say it, but this is something that we've been talking about last year too, that McKinnon might be a better running back than Peterson, and that Peterson is kind of getting by on his past accomplishments and stuff like that. But we didn't really see evidence of that. And technically, I don't think that we have enough of a sample to say that we've seen enough evidence of that over the long run right now. But I think that McKinnon did a better job maintaining patience. I know Zimmer complained a little bit about his dancing behind the line, but I thought for the most part, he did a very good job. First 10 carries, he averaged 6 yards a carry. It wasn't until the fourth quarter that we saw his yards per carry dip, and he still finished with a 4.7 yards per carry average. And, he did a good job picking his lanes. He did a good job creating power. He pushed through the pile on a couple of occasions, which is, I think, the biggest question about him. There were other times where he got to the outside and, made use of his speed. He played really well, but I thought, this was Alex Boone's best game. Mike Zimmer said the same thing. It's nice to know that, when we look at the same game and Zimmer says, what you're thinking or what you've evaluated, that you've probably hit, a good note. And I think it's pretty clear that Alex Boone had a fantastic game. Berger had another good game. I think Fusco had another underrated game. I think these past 2 games for Fusco have actually been pretty all right. And, people talk about replacing Fusco. And, I don't know if that needs to be done because he's been sort of low key pretty good. Clemmings, a lot of people thought he had a good game again for the second week in a row. And, for the most part, if you don't see sacks given up by your left tackle, you're probably happy. So I understand that he hasn't given up a sack in 2 games, just a big improvement over, what he did last season. But I still think he had a pretty poor game. There's a lot of whiffs in the running game, especially at the second level. There's a lot of mistakes in pass protection that Bradford moved himself out of. But Searles on the right side did a much better job than Andre Smith. He did a very good job. So that's kind of how, run game developed. I thought that the interior line did a really good job. Pro Football Focus agrees. They grade all three members of the interior line as members of the top five portion of the offense. They pulled well. They were able to get to the outside. They were able to generate yardage on the inside. And McKinnon took advantage of those opportunities. So those are all a big part of why the running game was good. And that was a really big reason the Vikings were able to generate first downs. I think all of their first downs were through the air, but in order to create those 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 situations, the Vikings were in 3rd and 4 a lot throughout the game. They had to run the ball well, and they did. So, I definitely think that one of the reasons the offense performed better than it usually did, or than it has for the past couple of games, is because the running game was revived. And I think that created all sorts of things. So it's not that running improved passing. It's not that they ran well, so they passed the ball well. It's that it made the passing meaningful because it meant conversions instead of throwing short of the sticks on 3rd and 14.
Like we've been used to the last several years. It was nice to see. And even when Asiata was involved, Asiata has that wonderful habit of going like 3 yards and then falling down on his face. But those were 3 important yards. And if we were getting 3rd and short, then that's a really good sign.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Next thing I want to bring up is Bradford. And Bradford didn't get sacked, which is great for our offensive line. And you had mentioned that Bradford was kind of bailing him out there for more than a few times. He was hearing the footsteps and was moving out of the way of it. What would you say? What do you feel like his comfort level is going into the Texans game now after having a couple of games under his belt? Like they had mentioned in the broadcast that they were tailoring the offense to him and even going so far as to be running plays that he used to run in Philadelphia. So what do you feel like his confidence level is right now after putting together this nice string of games where he's not lighting the world on fire, but he still hasn't committed a turnover and killed us yet?
I think that he's definitely developed a level of confidence that he didn't even have for the Green Bay game. And of course, the Green Bay game remains his best performance so far. But in terms of his comfort within the offense, I think that it's probably just there now. And I think the best evidence for that is something that maybe wasn't great for my fantasy football team, was definitely good, I think, for the offense in general, is that there were 9 different receivers that were the target of Bradford plays, and no receiver had more than 5 receptions. Obviously I want to see Diggs more involved. He's perhaps the most dangerous weapon the Vikings have through the air, but I think that the fact that Bradford felt comfortable targeting everybody instead of just 2 people, Diggs and Rudolph, is probably evidence that he feels like he has a bit more of a command of an offense, and he doesn't have to figure out which receivers he trusts or knows are good and could just make the best play. And so I think that his ability to spread the ball around, which again, this is something that we were lauding Teddy for, just in general, his Bradford's ability to spread the ball around, I think, is good evidence that. I think that he's kind of settled into the offense, and there's a pretty good hybrid of the stuff that he's comfortable with from Philadelphia and a little bit of his time in St. Louis, and the stuff that is already incorporated here within this offense. Which you have to do that. Like when Peyton Manning moved to Denver, they created the offense wasn't actually pumping on all cylinders with the new coordinator Adam Gase, I think, until they had actually hybrided the offense, Kubiak, that was it, until they hybrided the offense after Gase left, between what Kubiak does and what Peyton does. And that's when the offense actually started going again after Peyton was doing so well prior. So it's combining those concepts together into something that both the players and the coaching staff are comfortable with that are probably key to this. And that's kind of why that comfort exists.
They had pointed it out, and I don't know if we've ever actually talked about it. They mentioned on the broadcast that the tight ends coach for the Vikings used to be the offensive coordinator for Bradford last year. How much of what do you think the connection is between that and his success moving forward, or what he's achieved so far?
I don't actually think that there's that much of a connection in terms of like play design and coaching. I think Shermer doesn't really dip into the quarterback room, but he is consulted in the game plan, and I imagine that there's a discussion about the stuff that Bradford succeeded at and the stuff that he didn't succeed at. And then they implement that in the playbook for the week. But I don't think that they've designed any new plays. I think they've just gone to the plays that were common between the playbooks that Bradford excelled at. And I don't think that there's any language that was changed that Shermer was more familiar with, and that therefore Bradford's more familiar with. I think that honestly, the biggest input Shermer provided was his input on the decision to trade for him, and less on ways to get Sam Bradford ready. And that's invaluable, obviously. I mean, we've seen, that Shermer's recommendation has, sort of produced, these wins for the Vikings. But I don't know that Shermer was actually all that involved with designing anything else. But I'm sure that he provided the input in the weekly game plan for the stuff that he knew that Bradford was good at that was identical within the Vikings offense.
Well, we've talked about Bradford. We've talked about the run game. Charles Johnson all of a sudden started catching passes. Were you as confused as I was about the fact that he was becoming useful all of a sudden?
Yeah, no, it was nice to see. It was a little bit confusing.
Not complaining, mind you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was something else because we're getting kind of used to complaining about Charles Johnson's presence on the field, and I've been a little bit less concerned about it, but I think that it still makes sense to have concerns about it. And this is kind of the product of why he was on the field. I mean, because if you're running the correct routes and enabling other receivers to get open, then there's a reason that you need to be on the field, even if you're not racking up as many catches or receptions. But he still, wasn't paying back the faith that, that Bradford had given him earlier with, a lost contested catch and a lost drop. But, in this game, he did pretty well. And maybe, he gets restricted to, the role that Torrey Smith had early in his career, or the role that Deshaun Jackson occasionally had before he became a primary receiver. Maybe he's restricted to just being a big play guy, which unfortunately that's kind of Jarius Wright's role. And that's fine. 2 catches for 70 yards. I'm going to take that for the rest of the season if that's what ends up happening. But yeah, no, that was nice to see. And we got to see some clips of him running routes that, were pretty impressive. He got open at the release. Bradford recognized it right away, placed it in the breadbasket. We got to see him winning with his athleticism, which is something the Vikings fans have wanted to see for quite some time because they know, how athletic this person is supposed to be.
Speaking of athletic, let's talk about Patterson real quick. That I don't think anyone expected Patterson to be as involved in this game as he was on every side of the. I don't know if he actually played any defense, but it felt like he was out there the entire game. He was used in the run game, he was used in receiving, and he was used in special teams. Let's talk about his receiving and running real quick. The run play for him kind of crashed all of a sudden, but he was definitely useful in the passing game.
He received more snaps in this game than he did all of last season, plus the 3 prior games combined. 36 snaps, and like you said, he got involved in the passing game, he got involved in the running game. His involvement in the running game was actually, not all that interesting. 2 yards on a running from the eye. He probably did help Jerick McKinnon break that run on the Wildcat because it was it was either an option, which is what I suspect it was, or it was just a play fake. And either way, Patterson's presence there on the Wildcat with Jerick McKinnon taking the shotgun snap was pretty important to that too. But yeah, Patterson was used in a variety of ways, and I expect he'll be used in a variety of ways going forward, but I don't think that he's going to continue to get 36 snaps a game. He did earn more snaps, though, than he's been getting. Whether that's 30, whether that's 25, whether that's 20, that probably depends on the individual game plan, and I'm guessing that a combination of the game plan plus, halftime adjustments, plus, Patterson being productive, all played a role in that game of him getting 36 snaps. And I think the best evidence that we saw for that was Patterson being pulled off of punt gunning duties, which he had been performing extremely well for the past 2 games, really, really well, and transitioning that to Laquan Treadwell, where Patterson continued to get snaps on the offense. So, yeah, I think we're going to see more of him, and I think we're probably going to see him in exciting ways. Hopefully, it's not just going to be screen passes, and it's not going to be just running from the eye or being a play-action decoy, although he did pretty well on those screen passes. But it's going to be, more the traditional routes that he succeeded on Monday.
And since you mentioned his name, we can confirm that he is alive. He did get snaps in this game as well as the Green Bay game. Laquan Treadwell has been on the field. Can we please stop complaining that he's not getting snaps?
No, I don't think people will stop complaining. And I get it.
He's a rookie. We don't. It's a. We'll play him if he's a fifth rounder. We tend to save him if he's a first. It's fine. Who are you to judge Zimmer's methods at this point?
Are we really questioning Mike Zimmer's methods here? No, but I mean, it's not quite the same as Trey Waynes because cornerbacks you typically don't rotate unless I guess it's the last 2 weeks with the Vikings because they rotated 4 corners over 3 cornerback slots, which is kind of interesting. But you tend to rotate your receivers a lot more. I mean, we saw Patterson get a lot of snaps. We saw Thielen get a lot of snaps. Actually, against Green Bay, of course. We see Johnson get a lot of snaps. We see Diggs get a lot of snaps. And then Wright and Treadwell are getting like 0 to 2 snaps a game. And we saw Patterson get more snaps before his 7-game surge as a rookie. We saw him get more snaps just in general and just be on the field. And it's kind of funny that, we're not seeing Treadwell, despite the fact that you don't have to commit to him. You just have to give him a couple of snaps. So yeah, I don't really know what's happening. Obviously, the Vikings are being, super patient. And the evidence that we have about the reason that he's not seeing the field seems to be more related to, hey, he just needs to be completely aware of what the offense is, run routes at the right depth, etc. And maybe that's not what's happening right now, and that's what's keeping him off the field. He's 21. He's really young. And the Vikings have him for 4 years, so maybe 5 if he performs well enough. And so it's not like a huge long-term hit the panic button kind of thing, especially because we're only 4 games into the season. But it's a concern worth discussing.
What do you think about Diggs' performance this game? It wasn't exactly up to the standards that that we had mentioned earlier in the show, but he was getting open, he was being useful, and Bradford and him seemed to still have a good chemistry going.
Yeah, to the extent that he could control it, maybe he performed pretty well. On his targets, he had 7 targets, 5 receptions, 47 yards, including a somewhat longer one for 21 yards. To the extent that, you take a look at his ability to get open, which I haven't reviewed totally in depth, the All-22, which I think came out pretty recently. He seemed to do well. He seemed to get open. He just wasn't necessarily getting targeted. He might have had a drop. I think he had a drop on 3rd down, which was a bit frustrating. So to that extent, he didn't perform up to his standards. But, maybe he wasn't getting open as often, but he was getting open fairly often and against, Janoris Jenkins, who I wouldn't call an untalented cornerback. He's probably better than the average cornerback. Maybe he was overrated when the Giants signed him, but against a cornerback that probably does a better job against other receivers than he did against Diggs. So I would say that Diggs, in terms of what he did, probably performed like a pretty good receiver. In terms of his production, of course, it's a little bit more frustrating. It's kind of a Jarvis Landry line, 5 receptions for 47 yards.
Yeah, it wasn't something that we were. If you were following his numbers over the past few games, you'd think, okay, well, this is definitely a lower performance, but it's what you should expect from Diggs every once in a while. It's they're going to start being able to figure him out, so it's not completely out of the question that he's less than 100 yards or even less than 75. No one, and probably including Johnson, on this, no one saw Charles Johnson getting 70 yards out of this. So.
That's completely true. And yeah, I mean his yardage is going to fluctuate as teams kind of adjust, and they have different personnel and different matchup capabilities, and the Vikings go in with different game plans and stuff like that. And, I mean, no one saw Charles Johnson getting 70 yards. No one saw Cordell Patterson getting 38 yards through the air, and then another 2 yards on the ground.
I just wish I would have been in Vegas and been like, can I bet on how many snaps Cordell Patterson is going to have, and just watching the guy look on his face, going, You're gonna want to try to bet over 5 on that? Why? on what planet would Cordero Patterson be used as an offensive weapon? Why would you do such a thing?
In order for you to be able to sort of log that, you'd have to like make, because otherwise the bookie's probably going to be suspicious, right? So you'd have to be like, no, I've got a gambling addiction. Here are all the bets I want to make today, and you include that one in it.
and that's when you give them your 1-day chip.
Exactly.
Like, I want to bet all of this money and this chip, please. So let's talk about the defense and how Eli Manning managed to remain sack-free. This was it was really easy to figure out what their plan was, but like they had this great plan in theory that it was like a 2 to 3 step drop and then just get rid of the ball immediately. But boy, it didn't give the plays any time to develop. He was throwing worm killers just all the time. And the one time he did air it out, we were able to grab it Willie Mays style in a basket catch. So what do you think about their plan, about teams' plans moving forward? Is this a sort of offensive plan that we can kind of come to expect moving forward?
It really depends on the teams that they're going up against. Obviously the Vikings have been doing a very good job getting pressure, beating offensive tackles. I think Everson Griffin had a phenomenal game as a pass rusher. I think he only got 1 or 2 quarterback hits in. But I thought he kept on putting pressure on Eli Manning, and that pressure hurried a bunch of throws. That includes the interception that Xavier Rhodes reeled in. That was an Everson Griffin pressure. He consistently got underneath Eric Flowers in terms of leverage and was able to get past him, turn the corner, and get and force a throw. I think that the Giants planned for this. I mean, they saw 5 sacks against Aaron Rodgers, 8 sacks against Cam Newton. And they knew, like, hey, we've been running this no huddle 3-step offense. We just have to get rid of the ball right away, and that didn't work. So I don't know how many offenses are going to say that and look at that and be like, yes, this is the code. We need to use this to crack the Vikings.
This is the way that we keep our quarterbacks from getting their butt kicked up and down that field. Is we'll keep them upright by just flinging the ball past the line of scrimmage. That way it doesn't get intentional grounding. Like that's the way we're going to beat them.
Yeah, and I expect different teams will have different approaches. I think some teams will run the ball. They'll see, I think it's like 4.3 yards per carry allowed for the Vikings. They'll see 4.3 yards per carry allowed and be like, oh, maybe this is a team we can run the ball on, which the Giants found out pretty early is not really the case, and that the statistics are pretty deceiving because the Vikings are allowing some pretty good runs on like 3rd and long, which who cares. So, different teams will be like, well, we're going to run the ball to protect a quarterback and generate small successes over time, chip away at this defense. Or other teams are going to be like, hey, this team, they play a lot of zone coverage. We're going to run 4 verts against them and just hope that our offensive line can maintain protection. We'll keep a running back and maybe a tight end in there, and try to keep, and just attack them deep downfield, right? Other teams are going to go, hey, this pressure is coming really quickly. We don't really have the ability to protect against that pressure. So we're going to run a heavy screen game and stretch the defense out before running up the middle. And so, a bunch of teams will have a bunch of different approaches to mitigating this pressure, shotgun, 3-step drops, stuff like that. But I think that for the most part, the Vikings are versatile enough to deal with, this variety of game plans. I mean, the Giants tried to go to a slant passing game. That didn't really work out. Then they tried to go to a screen game, but like a tunnel screen, not like wide receiver screen. That didn't really work out. Other than one pretty phenomenal play that Paul Perkins put together, and that he juked out both Anthony Barr and Andrew Sandeo on that play. Other than that, they didn't do much. So a bunch of teams will have probably a variety of approaches based on their offensive philosophy, the personnel that they have, and the stuff that they notice when they scout the Vikings. But for the most part, it's a very versatile defense that should have the tools. So long as there are no more injuries, I guess, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that should have the tools to deal with not just any matchup type, but any offensive response that they'll have to the way that the Vikings run their defense.
Was it a result of keeping an extra blocker behind the line, or were they doing something else to keep Eli up? Because there was that great picture on Twitter about Linval Joseph getting triple teamed on a play. Were they just like keeping in an extra blocker, or what was going on there?
Well, the triple team I think ended up occurring on a running down, so they had another tight end in the box to deal with that. That run ended up being a loss, so the triple team was a poor decision. But
Is it really a poor decision to be triple teaming Linval Joseph?
I mean, if you just like leave Tom Johnson, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Like, the defensive line is pretty good, and Linval Joseph may individually deserve a triple team, but when other players may deserve a little bit more attention, that's going to cause some problems. Yeah, no, I don't think that in the passing game they kept in an additional blocker all that often. I think that they saw the running backs and tight ends as ways to relieve pressure as targets instead of as ways to protect against pressure. And different teams have different philosophies on that. In fact, Green Bay alone has had different philosophies on that throughout the years with Aaron Rodgers. They used to, when they had offensive line problems, keep things in max protect, and then they decided, well, that just encourages more people to rush, and then there's not that many targets, so he's going to hold on to the ball longer. And so then they decided, well, we'll have a player leak out into coverage, and he'll just be the hot route. And then teams started figuring that out, and so then they were like, well, just screw it. We'll just have 5 players in protection. Aaron Rodgers is just going to get rid of the ball right away, and when he doesn't, whatever. And I guess that worked for them. And for some teams, that doesn't work. And for some other teams, max protect works. So it's going to be different for every team. And in this case, I don't think the Giants kept an extra blocker in all that often. I think they saw their skill players as ways to relieve pressure through the passing game as opposed to protecting pressure. But sometimes they did. I saw Eric Flowers get a lot of help from tight end chips. I saw him get a lot of help from running back plays. I've seen Eric Flowers down block a defensive tackle and have the right guard pull and block that defensive end, which is super dangerous. I've seen, which is not an additional blocker, but it's help for Eric Flowers. I've seen a tight end take on defensive ends 1-on-1. So sometimes they'll bring in an extra blocker, but it's not going to be more than 6 protectors, which is fairly normal for offenses anyway.
So what happened other than a lot of crowd noise? What happened during that big interception when we basket catched the gift from Eli Manning?
Everson got underneath Eric Flowers' leverage immediately, and I think he was hitting Manning as he threw. I think that part of it is that Manning thought that the post route would. So I think that part of it is that it was a poorly thrown ball for sure. I think part of it is that the incoming hit affected the trajectory of the ball, and I think that Odell was supposed to run a more, I don't want to say, probably a more vertical version of a post route instead of the flatter route that he took. But even if he had it, it wouldn't have been close. It's really the difference between a throw that looks wild and a throw that looks inaccurate, and that throw looked wild. And I think it's because Odell may not have run the right route against that coverage. Like it's a couple of different versions of a post route based on the coverage that you see, and he didn't run it vertical enough. And so Eli's pass, which was going to be inaccurate no matter what happened, looked way off to nobody instead of, wow, that's just very inaccurate. Good job, Eli.
It looked to me as that play was starting to, as they were about to snap and people didn't look set. As soon as it appeared that he wasn't going to be handing off the ball, my first thought was, this is going to be a gift. He is going to air it out. He's going to do something stupid here. And sure enough, he threw that thing way up into the air. And if you watch it back, it looks like Odell pushes back the defender. Like he pushes him backwards, putting him into the position of actually being able to make that catch. Like, you just don't see that sort of thing that often. Like you see pushing off by a receiver every once in a while, and okay, you might get caught, you might not, but it really looked like he pushed him off like in basketball or something, and all of a sudden things just went horribly wrong. Like, we just shut down Odell Beckham anyway.
Yeah, well, I think some of that has to do with Odell's frustration. The push right before that wild interception. But I think part of it is that Odell was pushing off to run that wrong route. I think it looked like he's pushing Xavier to get it, but really I think he's just pushing off to run the wrong version of the route. So So
what did Xavier Rhodes do to stop the progress of Beckham and give him his worst game as a pro?
A lot of it has to just do with the physicality with which Xavier played. I'm sure trash talk played a role in getting inside Odell's head. It seemed to certainly, but I think that Xavier was using his length really, really well, and he wasn't going to get out physical by Beckham, and so his ability to stay close to Beckham and then constantly be a thorn in his side made it pretty easy for him to deflect, a lot of these passes. I mean, he was winning the contested catches against Beckham, and then Beckham just got frustrated, and he dropped what would be another Odell Beckham catch, one hander. He nearly got ejected from the game. There's a lot of stuff that has to do with Odell Beckham's mental state, and a lot of stuff that has to do with Xavier Rhodes's technical capabilities as a cornerback. Because early on, Beckham was able to get underneath and win some of those routes, especially pushing off on slants and winning that. But Rhodes did a better job of figuring out, where Beckham was going to go, how he was going to play, and he countered that, with the appropriate footwork and handwork.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is the three-headed monster that was being spoken of so highly going into this game really didn't end up doing much for them. They get over 100 yards out of it, and that was just about it.
They've been averaging something like 236 yards, I think, per game heading in, and they ended up with 103 yards coming out of it because, almost all of Eli's passing yards seem to have come from that screen to Paul Perkins. Other than that, they were completely shut out. Victor Cruz did a poor job against Newman, Waynes, and Munnerlyn. Sterling Shepard, it seemed like he wasn't even in the game. The Vikings secondary overall did a fantastic job, and I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that the receivers didn't have time to get open. And so even though I know Pro Football Focus said that Eli Manning was only pressured on 11 of his 45 dropbacks, but I think that is just... It's more evidence that they got rid of the ball quicker than they should have, or quicker than the receivers had the ability to adjust for, than it is evidence that the Vikings did not get pressure. Because I think they did, and I think that the response to that was to throw themselves out of pressure as opposed to throw while under pressure.
Yeah, it really depends on how you determine the word, or how you define the word pressure.
Yeah, no, for sure.
There was pressure there. There were a couple of instances where, say, Linval Joseph or Harrison Smith or Anthony Barr were coming in essentially without being touched. And if it would have waited for half of a second more, then Eli would be spitting out whatever form of turf is on the field there. So, yeah, it really depends on how you end up defining the word pressured there. I did want to mention the play of Harrison Smith. Harrison was also important as to keeping Odell Beckham from having a decent game, and his ghosting was just brilliant out there.
Yeah, no, he did a fantastic job throughout the game. No, I thought that his ability to double on top of Odell was pretty important, but I thought that maybe even more important was his ability to create stops in the run game. I think he led the team in tackles, and I'm pretty confident, although until I take a closer look or do a deeper dive into the statistics, I can't confirm, but I'm pretty confident that the vast majority of them occurred in the run game, and he was able to make up for the mistakes that Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr were making, both of whom had pretty subpar games, and he was able to fill in on the run and make some pretty big plays. I thought that for all phases of the game that Harrison Smith, as a pass rusher, as a run defender, as a coverage defender, I thought that he did a very good job. Sometimes it's the intelligence of his positioning, sometimes it's just making sure that he doesn't get caught up in play action. Sometimes it's just making sure that he can win when the quarterback decides to test him. And I thought that from that perspective, he did a very good job. He also had a critical block on the interception return for Xavier Rhodes, so go him.
No kidding. Great game by him, and he's really earning his accolades. This is probably the year that he becomes much more well known throughout the league as the best safety in the entirety of it. One last thing on the defense before we move to special teams. What did you think about the work of the linebackers against the Giants?
Yeah, I thought the linebackers were pretty disappointing. I thought Anthony Barr played too far away from the ball too often. I thought that you couldn't find him near the ball. I thought they had some issues in terms of run discipline. And he closed pretty well for the most part, but he was more responsible even than probably Andrew Sendejo on that Paul Perkins run, which, again, I'm focusing on that a lot because it's one of the few mistakes that were pretty obvious of the Vikings defense overall. Obviously he has that hit on Larry Donnell, which looks amazing, and that kind of showcases the kind of power that Anthony Barr can play with. But for the most part, he was absent, and I think that was to his detriment. It's not for the reasons that he was absent from the stat sheet in previous games, because he was kind of a quarterback spy in a lot of those games, and he obviously wasn't for Eli Manning. Eric Hendricks was kind of the opposite problem. He knew what play needed to be made. He was reading his keys well. He was reacting quickly and instinctively, and he was missing tackles just left and right. He was even having some trouble in coverage too. But yeah, for the most part, he was. And some of the tackles that he was going for, they looked really good until he kind of just slipped off and allowed another 8 or 9 yards. So, I thought that Kendricks had a very poor game, and I'm sure that any grading organization would probably ding him for it.
So let's talk special teams. Blair Walsh missed another kick, didn't he?
Might've.
He might have.
I heard rumor. It was I think it was a 44-yarder that he missed. With in the context of a season that's like not bad, but in the context of, hey, you've been missing a kick like nearly every game, dude.
That's all right.
Like,
anyone can attest to the fact that the new stadium is windy. You can feel the breeze in there. It's an open air stadium-ish thing. So, I mean, it's a kick can get moved due to the amount of air circulating around in the building, right? God, what? Every game. Every game.
And a 45, 46, 44-yard field goal, you can't make those every time, but even like a worse kicker, like a bad kicker, will make 70% of those. And Walsh is not close to hitting that. He's not close to hitting his expected field goal, averages at any range this season. And it's crazy because, again, I mean, we mentioned this last week. I was defending Walsh, and we should have defended Walsh for his play overall last season. It was his best season since his rookie year at all distances, and just focusing on the one miss when he made some pretty incredible makes over the course of that Seahawks game, overstated the problems. But then, of course, he had problems, in the preseason. He had problems in the regular season. And you kind of have to call into question, like, hey, does this dude have the ability to win games if the team that we're designing is supposed to win close games? Who wins close games for you? Good kickers, right? That's how you put points on the board when you only have, 8 or 9 drives in a game. And if you can't be confident in the guy to make it, which Zimmer functionally said about a week ago that one of the reasons they went for 2 is because, man, I don't know if we're going to make this extra point. Then I don't know if there's a solution. Like, maybe it's Robbie Gould. Maybe he's better. In fact, there's a pretty good likelihood of it, but it's not like Gould killed it his last season with the Bears or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know if there's a solution out there, but certainly it's a problem worth discussing.
Definitely worth discussing. Just it's just so upsetting to see. But we can talk about another aspect of special teams, which includes our man of the game, Cordarrelle Patterson, running up on that punt and just scaring the bejesus out of the returner, and he ends up dropping the return, and we end up getting the fumble recovery.
Yeah, that was the best offensive move in the first quarter, wasn't it?
It was really close, and it was just fun to watch because, again, Patterson was basically untouched on the way over there, broke the land speed record again, and didn't touch him, just scared the crap out of him.
Yeah, I'm really curious. It seemed like, especially from the replay, it seemed like he was hearing footsteps and dropped the ball. I don't know how much you can credit to Cordarrelle Patterson, but definitely Patterson deserves praise for his punt gunning, especially because it may have contributed to that muff, and that muff definitely contributed to points on the board for the Vikings. But yeah, it's pretty hilarious. I mean, the Blair Walsh worrisome. The rest of the special teams units phenomenal. Kickoff coverage, punt coverage, like we saw from Patterson, and then Patterson again, and then Laquan Treadwell, and and so on and so forth. And punting, Jeff Locke did a pretty phenomenal job. It's interesting, sort of how much special teams are contributing to the Vikings win. I think a lot of the factors in terms of special teams are positive and sustainable. I think that Marcus Sherrills is a phenomenal punt returner, and he's kind of proving it over the course of the past couple of years. And I think Cordarrelle Patterson's a phenomenal kick returner, and he's been proving over the past couple of years. The Vikings in Week 4 ranked second in starting field position. A lot of that has to do with how well the special teams have played. But beyond that, then you get to generate some additional bounces of the ball that go your way, right? Which includes a muffed punt. So yeah, no, it's the special teams are really buoying a team that, sometimes they may not be able to rely on their offense, but if you've got a really good special teams unit and you've got a really good defense, you're just going to win some games without a good offense. And it's just kind of cherry on the cake at this point that the offense finally did really well, and that maybe this is a sign that things start turning around for them too. But the special teams unit has been consistently good. I think Jeff Locke has strung together 3 really good games in a row. Blair Walsh maybe not so much, but he's good in kickoffs. And then the Vikings have had some pretty solid kickoff and punt return coverage aside from that first kickoff return of the game.
Yeah, let's talk about something before we hit the mailbag that really struck me, and that was immediately after the run after the catch that the Giants had, the massive one that ended up for the touchdown, and we took the field on offense. And in 5 or 6 plays, just immediately scored and just answered right back. Like, that's not been something the Vikings do.
Yeah, it was. I just found the play-by-play. Yeah, so after that Giant score, and it looks like the beginning of the fourth quarter. So your intuition is correct. The Vikings scored in 8 plays: a 3-yard run from Jerick McKinnon, followed by a 3-yard pass by Sam Bradford to Cordero Patterson, and then Rudolph for 16 yards, Patterson for 4 yards, Asiata for a yard, and then a pass to Asiata for 5 yards, which is a 3rd and 5 conversion from Asiata, and then a deep left to Charles Johnson for 40 yards.
Just punched him right square in the face again. You're staying down.
It was great because it stopped any potential comeback. Haven't seen that, from the Vikings in a long time. Even sort of under Mike Zimmer, you've always felt like this, like that team's heating up in the fourth quarter, and we're not that team. Oh God,
it was strange to watch just because you had a moment of doubt as a Vikings fan, like, okay, so they scored and we're slowing down a little bit. This could be bad. It's a Manning, but it's Eli, but it's still a Manning brother. Like this could end badly.
I mean, fourth quarter Eli has been pretty good at times.
Exactly. So the fact that any sort of doubt was just nipped in the bud immediately. Like, no, this game is actually going to be over. Like, you don't have to feel bad about leaving early. We're just going to kill this.
Yeah, no, it's. I think Bruce Arians uses this phrase, and this is something that I, as a debater, was very poor at because our coaches also use this phrase. But you got to step on their throats, right? You got to make sure that once you're ahead and once you're winning, you need to close it out. You need to make sure that there's no possibility of a comeback. I was very bad at that in debates. The Vikings have been very bad at that in football. Bruce Arians last year was incredibly good at that, and the Vikings, it looks like, at least in this game, were definitely good at it. They kind of, if you want to like think about it in terms of narratives of like the energy on the sidelines or the will of the Giants to win, it probably sapped some energy from them in terms of their ability to generate a comeback. Certainly, it reinvigorated the Vikings fan base, and I'm sure it really disappointed the Giants fan base, who have gotten kind of used to Eli Manning comebacks, and this could have been an instance of it. Because I mean, there's even a really good draw play comic about Eli Manning, just being awful in the first 3 quarters and turning into a golden god in the fourth quarter. It's something that the Giants are just used to, and if you can just nip that in the bud, basically like trip them up immediately, then yeah, it's fun to see it because I don't remember the Vikings doing it that often. Just oh hey, you seem to have generated a little bit of a hope of a comeback. Let me take care of that for you.
let me just put that out for you. This Zimmer says no.
Exactly. I love it.
Anything else we want to talk about the game before we go to the mailbag?
I mean, not a ton. I mean, like I think the most interesting story for me going forward that's not obvious, like, hey, Sam Bradford's continuing to play well. Hey, what the hell is up with Blair Walsh? Most interesting story for me going forward that is not obvious is Hey, maybe Jerick McKinnon is like not just a starting quality running back, but like a good one.
Is that, I was going to say, is that your hot take? But it's not really a hot take considering it's
It's
very
more a
possible.
proposal for a thing that we should track that maybe we're not tracking closely enough.
There you go. Well, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question that we have from the mailbag is, I like this one quite a bit. It asks, quote, "Can we attribute our success against the Giants to Norse mythology? I don't see many ice giants around."
That's true, but I feel like in Norse mythology that ice giants did a better job.
in the first, second, and third quarters of their battles, and they didn't just pull something out of their ass in the fourth.
Well, I mean, if you just think about it throughout Eli Manning / Ice Giant history, I mean, Eli Manning's thrown a passer rating of 55 against the Vikings. Ice Giants have a better winning record against the Norse gods. Jesus.
Can we settle this real quick? Wade Stover on Twitter asks, "What is the correct nickname for the Vikings defense? Purple Rain or Zim Reapers?"
So when I saw this tweet, I was like, I feel so sad that I have to answer this the way that I do, because Zim Reapers is an amazing name. That should be the name of the defense. I love that name. That's great. I think it is going to be Purple Rain. I mean, we just saw that on Monday Night Football. Gruden is wearing the shirt. Prince just died. It's obviously going to be Purple Rain. But Zim Reapers is amazing. I love it.
And here's my problem with it, and I think I've mentioned it on the show before too, the whole, like, any sort of association with Prince, while we share the same color, needs to not be a thing because of his involvement in the collapse of the Vikings team in 2009 with that god-awful song of his. That, I believe it was Purple and Gold was the name of it, and it's atrocious. It's on YouTube. We've referenced it on the show repeatedly because it's such a low light in our history. And I think as a result, he deserves a lifetime ban from like nicknames and things involving the show. Here's my hot take on it. Yes, I think that's a thing.
At least you recognize that it's like a flaming hot take.
Yeah, it's like I'm a huge Prince fan. Go back a couple episodes to when Prince died, and I have lots of stories. I'm a big fan. I think that we need to avoid calling this Purple Rain. Purple Rain doesn't.
Wait. So my question is: is this more like punitive for the song that Prince unleashed on the Vikings, or is it more you're guarding against the possibility of a collapse because that's how the 2009 season ended?
I think why can't it be both?
You gotta pick one, man.
Well, but listen, like the Purple Rain defense, like that doesn't inspire fear into anything. Come on. The Purple Rain, because nobody listens to that and thinks REIGN. Like, nobody thinks that. Everyone thinks Purple Rain RAIN. Like it's so you just wanted to see us laughing? Is that what's happening? Like I don't feel like Purple Rain is an appropriate nickname for a defense that's this evil. That is going out and doing all of this, creating turnovers, smacking around people, abusing quarterbacks to the degree to which they've been doing. Like, come on. There's a better name for it, and I feel like it's Zim Reapers.
Zim Reapers is such a good name, but like, whether or not a thing is like the right and proper name, like, and like aesthetically just a better name, and whether or not it's the name that gets going, like, those are just two separate questions. I mean, we had this discussion about US Bank Stadium. No one's calling it the Vault. It's clearly a better name, but whatever.
That's what they should have been calling. Yeah, there's just no way around it, but no one's gonna call it. Along those lines, you and I have talked about this too, but I feel like we need a real celebrity fan for the Vikings. Like, we're a decent team now. We're 4-0. We're moving up. I feel like we need a real, like, celebrity fan. Like, Nick Swardson is getting a lot of press and everything, and it seems to be like adopted as the #1 Vikings fan. But I feel like
I still think that Josh Duhamel gets more play than Nick Swardson. But like that feels kind of lame to say. No offense.
Exactly.
Gosh.
Like it's not a. I just feel like we can do better than that. Like, can we get the guy from Owl City or something? Like, he's relevant, isn't he? He's from Owatonna. What about
I don't know, man. Like, I'm trying to think about this. So the 2013 Seahawks, who was their guy? It was just Macklemore, right?
That was Macklemore, and
admittedly pretty big in 2013.
Yeah, huge in 2013. I feel like we could still get the guy from Owatonna, or we can get what was the name of the religious guy, or the guy who played the religious teenager in Clerks 2? Can we get him?
How is that better than Josh Duhamel? You can't even remember this dude's name.
It was a memorable role. I'm just.
Okay, so here's the thing then. The defense gets the name Purple Rain so that you can pretend Prince is that guy.
No.
No, that has to be. That's the only thing. First, because you can't stop that defensive name because it's already been. John Gruden was on national TV wearing a shirt with that name. It's the name now. Second,
so this is all John Gruden's fault.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. Second, Dead Prince is a way bigger celebrity than a live Macklemore.
Yeah. God, I still don't like it. Nothing about this that makes me feel good.
Okay, so I mean, the Broncos didn't have a celebrity, did they?
This is where Dusty would be useful. And that's not a sentence I've said on the show in a really long time.
Because the Panthers had Steph Curry. That's pretty great. We haven't, I mean...
I'm just not a Swardson fan. I just feel like we can do better.
No, we can, because he's like a mid-tier stand-up comic, right? Like he's had like some Comedy Central appearances and...
He has.
And a couple of writing credits on shows. But that's it.
Yeah.
Josh Duhamel was on Blood and Oil or whatever the name is.
The show about North Dakota Badlands filmed in Utah with mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Definitely.
So
flattest state in the union.
Yeah, it's like, really? The ads have mountains? Good for you guys. Next question is from Sydney McSweeney, who asks, is this a new beginning for Patterson? Can we expect to see more of him?
I addressed a little bit before the mailbag, but I think that we're going to see more of him. I don't think that we're going to see 38 snaps going forward unless there's like some sort of game plan specific thing. Like if you're up against a team that has really, really poor tackling corners, I'm trying to think of a team whose corners are really bad at tackling, maybe the Steelers. If you're up against a team like that, then just screen passes to Patterson all day. Like, what could go wrong? But if you have a team that's really good at that, like the Atlanta Falcons, I mean, their cornerbacks can tackle really, really well. Both Alfred and Trufant are very good at it. Then there's no reason to do that, and you'll see more Charles Johnson, and you'll see more Adam Thielen, right? So I think it's game plan specific about the things that Patterson's good at and the things that he's not so great at. But I think that he's clearly earned more playing time in general.
Next question, actually it's two questions from Josh Bjork, who asks, first, was the Giants' most targeted receiver the turf?
That's actually a pretty decent question.
That's a legit question. His other question is it weird not to think Sendejo is bad?
It's kind of interesting because this is like probably Sendejo's worst game of the season. But maybe that actually speaks well to him because he didn't have as bad a game as some of the games that he had last year. So answer the first question. The turf was highly targeted, and certainly more targeted than Victor Cruiser. For some reason, Bobby Rainey, who had 9 targets, or Odell Beckham, who had 9 targets. But it was targeted enough that I think it gets counted in the conversation. Second, Andrew Sendejo, pretty good last 3 games, actually. Pretty solid, maybe even a little bit better than pretty solid. He filled in the run well. He didn't make too many mistakes. He had like one major missed tackle that I was really upset about over the last 3 games, which is fine for safety. I mean, that's just going to happen for safeties that aren't as good as Harrison Smith or Eric Weddle. This game, I was like not happy with him. This seemed more like the Andrew Sendejo we're a little bit more used to. But yeah, it is weird to think that Andrew Sandejo is doing all right, and I think that on balance for the season, yeah, he's doing all right, and you can keep that. Like you can be like, hey, that's pretty cool. He's legitimately keeping Anthony Harris and Jaron Kearse off the field, who might make more mistakes in terms of alignment that you may not even be able to see, plus actual mistakes in terms of like coverage and run defense and stuff like that you will be able to see. And for now, that seems to be working for the defense.
On Twitter, GoneFishing58 asks, should the Vikings consider trading for Adam Vinatieri?
What do you think his worth is? Like, legitimate question. One of the greatest kickers of all time. Overrated, maybe, but like, who cares? He's good. That's all really matters for the context of this discussion.
Probably, and we've had this discussion on Vinatieri before, where I've said that he probably deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but I think that's only true if you give like a bunch of kicker spots, but I also think they all deserve this. Like, I think Vinatieri deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. I think that a couple of kickers before him deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think that should keep him out. Right?
Right.
Like Morton and I don't want to say this, but and Gary Anderson, both the Andersons.
Both the Andersons?
But it's true though.
Well, yeah, but
no,
things can be true and wrong at the same time. Let's
Well, certainly Morton Anderson probably deserves it over Vinatieri. But yeah, according to John Gruden, Robbie Gould, I remember that. I remember him saying that on a Monday night game. Robbie Gould deserves to go to the Hall of Fame.
I do remember that, and I do remember like about spit taking my beer. Going, really? That's where we're going with this.
Kicking, just even right now, that's your go-to. But yeah. I don't know how much Vinatieri is worth. I mean, he's old, so you're not going to get a bunch out of him. But it's not like the Vikings, traded for 8 years of Sam Bradford. Right?
Exactly, right.
They traded for 1.5 or 2, right? So if you trade for 1.5 or 2 years of Vinatieri, you're probably going to get a pretty good kicker.
Well,
how much do you think he's worth?
What do the Colts need exactly besides everything?
Well, I would start with everything, but they need a cornerback more than anything else. They keep on getting hurt. Like Cromartie's been hurt a couple of times. Vontae Davis, I think, has only played one game.
And they released Cromartie today. Somebody think of his kids.
It's going to take some time to think.
There's a lot of kids, yeah.
They throughout the course of this preseason and season lost their third cornerback, their fourth cornerback, and their fifth cornerback. Then they also lost to safety. So I'm guessing that they want defensive backs. I am not comfortable with parting with any of the Vikings defensive backs, honestly.
Just thinking, they need receivers. They need somebody to be able to get the ball, but they also need offensive they need line support. They have any position that's not quarterback, they're kind of shaky at right now. So
maybe Justin Tratto and a fourth?
Maybe.
That sounds like a lot, but Justin Tratto's a better pass rusher than anything they have right now. Him and Henry Anderson, that's all they need.
Speaking of, Weeby Sweet Monty on Twitter asks, what would Blair Walsh have to do this season to finally be replaced? Kill Zimmer's dog?
Oh, man.
I'm not putting it past him. I feel like... I would kick a guy off the team for that.
I mean, yeah.
I like how you're thinking about it for a second. Well,
it was more processing what you said. That is a fireable offense. Yeah, good point.
I have thought about the question, and yes, I would fire him for that.
Let me think about this more. This is a very analytic podcast. We don't want to get too hot. No, I think I'd fire him.
No, let's just let's just black and white this. This is my hot take. I would fire a player for killing my dog.
No, maybe. Okay, plays poorly in one game and misses a game-winning kick in the other game, so long as that game-winning kick is under 50 yards. I think at that point the Vikings are just screw it.
It has to be something that he could hit and should be hitting. What if he just went out?
And I think you have to lose the game. I think the Vikings have to go not undefeated for this to happen.
Well, yeah. So what about a situation where he misses every extra point, and we lose by less than that, than the number of missed extra points.
So like the Vikings lose by 3 and he missed 4 extra points?
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to talk to the defense about giving up 4 touchdowns, man.
See, you're an apologist because you weren't thinking about whether or not that this meant that we should be getting rid of him. Your first thought was, man, we got to talk to the defense about giving up those 4 touchdowns. I mean, come on. Like, that's the first place your brain went.
I was just thinking, like, what? Because I need a full picture in my mind of these scenarios, and you just gave me a picture where the defense gives up 4 friggin' touchdowns. No, yeah, I think that you should. The thing that really gets at me is that the Packers were right not to let Mason Crosby go. Like that really screws with my perspective on the Blair Walsh thing. I think if that had never happened, I'd just be like, yeah, no, obviously you get rid of him. But like, I haven't been thinking about it, right? Because the Packers were like, yeah, Mason Crosby, he missed like 4 kicks in a row, whatever. He'll figure it out. And then he did.
I'm just saying that if he killed my dog, I would release him. That's
just gonna put that out there. Don't at me.
Like, if you want to argue with me on Twitter about whether or not you release a man for killing your dog, you can find me at Big Mono or at Norse Code DN. Come at me, bro. Come at me. Question from Cole Nelson. Question from Cole Nelson asks, were Patterson's routes better than they have been in the past, or will he just be a screen game threat?
I mean, one of the routes that they showed on the ESPN broadcast was not good. But like, I can't really answer that holistically until I do sort of a more realistic breakdown that involves me actually like looking at the all 22 instead of going off of some quick rewatches of the broadcast. So I mean, I can't really speak to that. I am guessing that some of the stuff that is a little bit more difficult to track, like breaking routes to the right depth, he has down now. Some of the other stuff, like if you look at it from a couple of perspectives, he may not look like any better of a route runner, right? He may look like, hey, you're giving away your routes. Hey, you're rounding out your routes. Hey, you're snapping your head way too soon. Hey, you've got your hands up way too soon. Hey, your hands aren't coming up together. There's a lot of stuff that he could do that is the exact same as like his sophomore year in the NFL. And he could still be a better route runner because maybe he was running the wrong routes in practice. Maybe he was running routes to the wrong. Well, we know he was running routes to the wrong depth in practice. Maybe he optioned incorrectly. Maybe he's reading the play wrong. Just stuff like that. Maybe he's false starting. There's stuff that we don't know that are a little bit more difficult to figure out that pertain to route running. That wouldn't make for a 1-for-1 comparison, but this is definitely like a question I want to think about this week as I look at the all 22 and have like a better picture of what happened.
So I got 2 more questions for you, and the first one is: should I start to worry about Kendricks?
No. So I think his week 1 performance. I think that's the one where he got Defensive Player of the Week. I think his week 1 performance was like overrated. I thought that he did, better than average. I don't think it was like the best defensive performance in the NFL, even though he got like a pick 6. But I think it's evidence that like he's not bad, right? He had 2 bad games, right? So I'm not that concerned. And it's not like last season he was like a defensive rookie of the year candidate or anything like that. In fact, I thought last year his rookie year was overrated, right? I thought that, and this is a guy that I wanted the Vikings to draft in the first round. This is a guy that I've been totally behind. So I don't want to say this, but I thought that he didn't play as well as a lot of people said that he played. His rookie year. I thought that he did all right with a bunch of big mistakes. So I get it. Like I think that it makes more sense to ask this question than my initial framing of the response. But again, no, I don't think it's time to worry about Kendricks, especially because the stuff that he's not doing well right now, like missing a tackle, is not stuff that he was screwing up as a rookie, and not stuff that he was bad at in college. And the stuff that he's doing really well is the stuff that you worry about over the, if a rookie doesn't pick up and by the time they're in their second year they haven't picked up, that's when you start to worry. But he's reading plays correctly. The Vikings are trusting him to manage enormous responsibilities in the run game, especially when Everson Griffin lines up wide. You've got Eric Kendricks in the B gap and he's taking on a fullback one-on-one. He's doing that stuff because they think that he's pretty good and pretty smart about, reading the play correctly, reading his keys correctly, and getting the ball. So that stuff he's taking care of. That's the stuff I worry about more. The stuff that he's been good at in the past and is not good at now makes me less worried. So I would say don't worry about Kendricks for now. But, of course, if he puts together, a couple of bad performances in a row after this, you ask questions. Like, what the hell happened? You give him another year, but, you consider, hey, what happens if we rotate Edmund Robinson or Audie Cole in? Does that improve defensive performance a little bit? We'll see.
Final question is from the hoodie. It's from Judd Zolgad's hoodie, who asks, if there was a Master Chef competition between all of you, who wins and what is the winning dish? I would like
James.
I would like to handicap this.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Here's the handicap because Dusty's going to kill us.
Yeah, I don't think there's much question about that.
No. So, what if it was a crock pot thing?
Oh.
So, it's a competition, and the best food that is made out of it has to be done in a crock pot. I feel like I've got a fighting chance. And we'll have to ask Dusty on the next episode. So, those...
I mean, I also kick ass at crock pot, but yeah, no, you're right. That's a pretty good equalizer.
Yeah, I'm seeing and you are famous for your crock pot at training camp.
Yeah.
So
I live a crock pot lifestyle, man.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not just food. It's a way of life, the crock pot life. So that's.
You did see the birthday gift I got, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's. We can get this going. This will be fun.
Yeah. So this will be discussed on the next episode. So there's your excuse for wanting to check out the next episode. This is your tie-in.
So after drudging your way through this episode, finally we give you an incentive to listen to the next episode.
Yes, we finally give you the reason to. If this were Star Trek: The Next Generation, you would hear the dun 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 dun, and then it would say to be continued, and then we'd play back at the during the beginning of the next episode. So. Yeah, there's your reason to listen. So we will answer this question with Dusty during the preview show about the Texans. That's coming up next. Arif, is there something you would like to plug for your writing this week?
I'm taking a little bit of a step back this week because of some personal stuff. People who follow me on Twitter are pretty aware of it. But I still am going to do the offensive line piece at 1500. I'm still probably going to do the statistics piece, which that one's probably the easiest one to do. So actually, that one's even more likely than the offensive line piece. And then I'll try to figure out if I can do another piece of Cold Omaha. It would be either that Cordell Patterson question, which I think is fascinating, or a Harrison Smith piece.
If you would like to donate to the show, you can do so one of two different ways. If you hear value in what you've just heard, you can do it at patreon.com/Norse Code, or you can go to paypal.me/Norse Code, and you can donate Tree Fitty and help us keep the lights on. We really do appreciate it. We love being ad-free, and we love being supported by you guys. So, kudos to you guys. Really appreciate the numbers. We just finished out our best month ever. By far, we nearly doubled our best month from previous from last year. So, thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate the listens. Please keep showing. Please keep giving links to the show to other people. Check out our YouTube page as well. You can visit our website at NorseCodePodcast.com. You can also find us at TheDailyNorseman.com as well. You follow us on Twitter. I am at Big Mono. Arif is at Arif Hassan NFL, and Dusty is at something. Dusty O'Connell, I believe. Yeah, at Dusty O'Connell. This is just Rip on Dusty. This is just the Rip on Dusty episode. It's great.
We've had even worse ones. So this is a Rip on Dusty.
Yes, this is a. We'll include in the show notes on the iTunes page, #RipOnDustyEpisode. So just so you can keep it in your listing. This is what you're looking for. When you're looking for a Rip on Dusty episode. Norse Code DN is the Twitter handle. Please follow us. It also gives out the show, the episode link immediately when it's uploaded. So you will want to do that and subscribe to us on iTunes. Review us on iTunes. Why the heck not? We always appreciate hearing from you guys. Or you can email us at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. I think that's everything. I think that's a show. Dusty and Reef will be back later this week with a preview of the Texans game, which we have all sorts of reasons to be hopeful for, especially since J.J. Watt is apparently retiring back to his cabin in the middle of nowhere for the foreseeable future. Go us. So, for Reef, for Dusty, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening, and our formula is this: spoons out. And we will see you later this week.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.